Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digi Finance video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at UUTI's newest article, and this is their bi-monthly sales rankings of their best-selling card for each of the different rarities. So this is for the time period of March 16th to the 29th, and it's always interesting to take a look at what's selling really good in Japan and how these sales are impacting the Japanese meta, on top of taking a look at what the Japanese meta is doing. So going over the rankings, starting with the best-selling SR during this time period, we have Hexablaumon. So Hexablaumon is a really powerful blue mega to be playing around with, and it's definitely interesting on how good this card could be. So what this card is doing is he has two big abilities. His first ability is a when attacking ability, where you basically get to trash the bottom two evolution sources off of one of the opponent's Digimon, and then if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in play, then this Digimon gains jamming. So jamming is really important for blue just because blue doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of high DP Digimon, and they don't have a whole lot of ways to DP boost their Digimon efficiently. So usually blue opts to go for this jamming strategy where they could just safely aggress onto the opponent's security, because jamming just doesn't allow them to die to security checks, unless it's from an option, but that's a completely different story. But this is just really good, allowing Hexablaumon to safely aggress onto the opponent while also attacking their evolution sources, taking away their abilities, getting you one step closer to his ability actually triggering. And then the other ability that he has, which is the one that a lot of players are probably looking to try to utilize, is his All Turns ability, where all of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources can't attack or block. So he's kind of acting like Shukamon from BT03, where if they have no Digivolution sources on any of their Digimon, then they gain security attack -1, except that this is the step up from that, where he just completely turns off their ability to attack or block. So he does have the big weakness where if you are able to get rid of the Hexablaumon after he's just been stun locking the field, then the field is now unlocked and they could go ham onto your security. But if they can't, then Hexablaumon will just steamroll the game, just because he'll keep the opponent's Digimon from really doing anything, and if they don't have the ability to Digivolve or increase their Digivolution sources, then they just won't be able to do anything, and he could easily take away the game, making him a really powerful blue Digimon to be playing around with. And he is just a relatively decent generic card, where he could kind of just go into any deck and support any type of strategy. So he has some really high flexibility in terms of how you could play this card. And then if we hop on over to take a look at some Japanese data, we could definitely see that during this time period, blue definitely was on the incline in events being played, and the graph correspondingly shows that there is an increase in blue. And even though blue isn't doing as good as numbers as some of the other colors, we definitely can see that there is an increased interest in blue and what blue is doing. So it only makes sense that the more people are buying up this type of card, the more people are going to be playing this type of deck, and the more representation it will have in the overall meta. Next, on to the best-selling rare during this time period, it looks like we have BlackWarGrowlmon. So BlackWarGrowlmon is a really decent purple level 5 Digimon to be working with, because he has some really good abilities. So his first ability that he has innately is a Digiburst ability of Digiburst 3. So you trash 3 of your Digivolution sources to res one of your purple level 3 Digimon for free. So this is really, really powerful, because you basically just want to utilize this ability before you Digivolve, so that way when you Digivolve into your Mega, then you could use that level 3 body for whatever that Mega is going to be doing, and you don't have to utilize this ability right away. You could time it for when you feel like it is correct to use this card, so its ability being on a main timing definitely makes it a little bit more flexible on how you could utilize the card. And then on top of which, he gives this really powerful inheritable ability, where it's an on-attack ability, where once per turn, you could unsuspend this Digimon by deleting one of your other Digimon. So this is really powerful in a lot of different combinations. So obviously his built-in synergy is you use his Digiburst ability to res a Digimon, and then you use that Digimon that you just res as fodder for his inheritable source on the Mega. So that's kind of like the intended use of this card, but the card is still really, really good to use in a whole bunch of different purple decks. And purple as a whole is also slightly on the incline in terms of its popularity because people really are looking to build that Guilmon deck, and the Chaos Guilmon deck is definitely looking to be a really interesting and really powerful deck. So if we take a look at the Japanese data, we can see there is a slight increase in representation and demand for people playing the color purple, and that kind of still shows on the graph. Even though it did take a huge downturn initially, it definitely seems like it is recovering and starting to stabilize as more and more people realize how good the deck and the color can be. And then moving to the best-selling uncommon during this time period, we have Guilmon. So with BlackWarGrowlmon being the best-selling rare, it synergizes really, really well with the purple Guilmon, just because the purple Guilmon has this really powerful ability where it's an on-delete ability, and when this card is deleted by card effect, then you get to increase your memory by 1. So when your Mega is attacking with BlackWarGrowlmon underneath it, and then you utilize this ability to delete Guilmon, you will be gaining the 1 memory back, and that's just really, really decent. Most people also play Tapermon for a very similar style of effect, where they'll just sacrifice Tapermon to an ability and then get the card draw off of it. But because purple has the ability to dig through its deck relatively efficiently, it might not always want to draw cards, so having the availability and option of also gaining the memory is really, really nice. And then purple has just a whole bunch of other self-sacrificing effects, so it's not really hard to figure out when and how to utilize this ability. And then the best-selling common during this time period is still going to be Agumon. So this Agumon is the new Agumon that has the very powerful on-play ability where you get to check the top 3 cards of your deck and add a card with Greymon in its name or Omnimon in its name to your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So this is a really, really powerful card, considering one of the best-selling cards in the previous video was Nokia, and this combos really, really well with Nokia, where you'll just play Nokia, then Nokia can play Agumon, and then you use Agumon's ability to start to dig for your Greymon or Omnimon, so that way you could Digivolve into that Greymon or Omnimon and rest Nokia to gain the memory back. So this card still sees a whole bunch of demand because of that combo, and because red is still a more popular color. As we can see, red's representation hasn't really decreased, but the overall win percentage of red has definitely taken a huge dive. So even though red is still a very popular color, it just hasn't been performing as well lately, probably because of the shifts and changes in the overall meta and what people are thinking and picking up and playing with. Because there's so much red can do at this point that red isn't just defined by one deck anymore. So even though red as a whole is on the decrease, there's still just a lot of people playing red, and it just means that some of the other colors are doing a little bit better than what red was doing before, just because, again, the shifts and changes in the overall meta. So it's definitely interesting to see with all of this data where the Japanese meta is going, what they're interested in, and what they're picking up. And we could kind of paint this a really interesting picture that even though yellow is probably the best performing color and the best performing decks in this meta, people just already have all of the yellow cards, which is why it hasn't been selling super great, because they already have everything. And as people are discovering more and more things with some of the other colors, people are buying up some of the other colors to try to build those decks, even though those decks aren't performing as well. There's still just a lot of unknown variables in the meta, just because of how many decks you could build with how diverse the card pool is. And it definitely is interesting to think about all of the possibilities of what the game can hold. And then in terms of what the English market is doing, we could definitely see some crazy spikes and crazy swings in terms of the market, just because as our meta starts to continue to develop and as we're getting more time to spend with the meta, people are still thinking about picking up certain cards. People are still entering the game and need to pick up some cards. So we could definitely see a lot of fluctuation still happening in terms of what our cards doing and how they're performing. But for the most part, outside of a couple of outliers, everything seems to be kind of stabilizing and starting to normalize on the lower end. It's just there's a couple of like huge specs that people are buying out cards on, and there's just a whole bunch of interest on a couple of different cards, making them have more attention. And as they have more attention, obviously they're going to hold a higher price, and because they hold a higher price, more people are going to try to sell those cards at a slightly lower price to try to undercut them, and then that's how the card kind of just starts to settle in on what its price actually is going to be after it spikes and increases. But as I said, for the most part, the vast majority of the game is starting to stabilize, and a lot of the cards are still starting to find their price point and start to settle and stabilize at certain price points. So for the most part, the market is performing relatively well and as expected and relatively healthy. And again, a lot of the money cards are going to be on the alternate art cards, just because those are the cards that are going to be harder to get and harder to obtain. But for the most part, the majority of the market is starting to settle, again, outside of a couple of outliers. But in terms of cards that you should be thinking about picking up, I would definitely consider picking up some of the cards that are on the cheaper side that are still highly played, and I would still consider picking up a lot of the staples that you know from all of these Japanese results and events and deck lists will be competitive cards for quite a while. So you should take a lot of this information to figure out what and when you should be picking up the cards that you want or need based on when and what you want to be playing. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.